is often a temptation in leading worship services to go with your dominant emotion, to feel grief and sorrow and anger and hurt and hopelessness. But I find that is not what life is all about. That this is always the mix. That even in times of despair and hurt, there remains hope and sometimes joy to be found. And at the end of the service today, I want to share with you a poem written by a young transgender person who's from West Philadelphia that I think encompasses both. So hang in there. We're feeling a lot of things today. When I feel a lot of things, I think about stories that help me to make sense, to make meaning of the world. And in my tradition, there is a story of a man called Job. His name in English is spelled J-O-B, like the word job, but it's pronounced Job. And it is a story from Hebrew scriptures that speaks to the reality of suffering in the world and answers a question that the fancy word is theodicy. But in common English, it's why do bad things happen? It seeks to answer that. And I want to share with you some of the reading from this Hebrew poem because I find it meaningful, and I hope that we might make meaning of it together. So these are readings from the Hebrew scriptures from the book of Job. A man in the land of Uz was named Job. That man was honest, a person of absolute integrity. He feared God and avoided evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters and owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 pairs of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a vast number of servants, so that he was greater than all the people of the East. He is rich, Each of his sons hosted a feast in his own house on his birthday. They invited their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When the days of the feast had been completed, Job would send word and pray for his children. Getting up early in the morning, he prepared burnt offerings for each one of them. For Job thought, perhaps my children have sinned and then cursed God in their hearts. Job did this regularly. Buckle up, this is where it gets strange. One day, the divine beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and the one known as the adversary also came among them. And the Lord said to the adversary, where did you come from? And the adversary answered to the Lord, from wandering about on the earth. The Lord said to the adversary, have you thought about my servant Job? Surely there is no one like him on earth, a man who is honest, who is of absolute integrity, who reveres God and avoids evil. The adversary answered the Lord, does Job revere God for nothing? Haven't you fenced him in, his house and all he has, and blessed the work of his hands, so that his possessions extend throughout the earth? But stretch out your hand and strike all that he has, and he will certainly curse you to your face. The Lord said to the adversary, look, all he has is within your power. Only don't stretch out your hand against him, his body. So the adversary left the Lord's presence. One day Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. A messenger came to Job and said, the Sabaeans took them and killed them. I alone escaped to tell you. While this messenger was speaking, another arrived and said, a raging fire fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and devoured your young men. I alone escaped to tell you. While this messenger was speaking, another arrived and said, they came and took the camels and killed the young men. I alone escaped to tell you. While this messenger was speaking, another arrived and said, your daughters and sons were eating and drinking wine when a strong wind came and struck the 4 corners of the house. It fell upon your young people and they died. I alone escaped to tell you. Job arose, tore his clothing, shaved his head, fell to the ground, and worshipped. Worshipped. He said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I will return to thee. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." That is wild. But afterwards, Job spoke up and cursed the day he was born. Job said, "Perish the day I was born, the night someone said, 'This boy has been conceived.' That day let it be darkness. May God above ignore it, and light never shine upon it. May deepest darkness claim it, a cloud linger over it. May that night be childless. May no happy singing come in it. May those who curse the day curse it." My very first ministry gig was as a chaplain at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I was 24 and tasked with walking into a children's hospital to offer pastoral care, spiritual care to people. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I was prepared. I'm going to tell a story that involves sick kids. It involves grief. I invite you to breathe in when you feel discomfort, when you feel grief, and be present to it. One of my favorite families at CHOP had a baby girl, baby A, we'll call her. These parents were young, they're older than I am, but young, blameless, of absolute integrity, honest and upright. Did nothing to deserve a child who had to be in the NICU. And baby A would giggle and smile and scream and cry and kind of dance. She was adorable. And I loved getting to meet with this family and getting to rejoice after she was born. But then it became clear over the course of months that I was there that things were not going well with baby A, and that her lungs were not fully developed, and she was going to need a lot of medical intervention if she was going to survive. And I met with these young parents almost every day, because I'm supposed to provide pastoral care, spiritual care. And I constantly thought, what can I say to these people? What do I do? Do I pray? Do I do a blessing? I don't know. Why do bad things happen? And the question I had then was, where is God in all of this? And I read the story of Job that summer. The man who was blameless and upright, who has all these bad things happen to him, has this great life. And then there's this divine meeting, the divine beings, the text says. And the one known as the adversary, which the word in Hebrew is Satan, where we get the word Satan. Not how we usually think of it, the devil and the pitchfork. And someone who is the adversary. Someone like kind of the prosecutor in the divine court versus the defense attorney. There's this divine meeting. And the advocate goads God into this challenge to torture this poor man, to prove a point. Take whatever you will from him. Just don't harm his body. And these bad things happen. And Job responds, "The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Why do bad things happen? And this man continues to praise, continues to do what he's been doing. What is going on in this story? Of course, he does that for a little bit, for the first 2 chapters. But in chapter 3 of the book of Job that we read, Job curses the day he was born. He gets so angry, so hurt. And he curses the day he was born for a long time. And then he has friends show up. Friends come to offer him pastoral care, offer spiritual care. And what do they do when they get here? How do they offer pastoral care? Do they have the same questions I had? What do I do? What do I say? His friends spend the next 35 chapters of Hebrew poetry trying to explain to Job in beautiful words why he is suffering so much, why his children have been killed, why his lands have been destroyed, why his life has been plunged into chaos. And they say, well, it's because you must have done something, or because your parents did something, because God is wise and just. It doesn't happen for no reason. You must have done something. And Job continues to say, I did nothing wrong. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Baby A's mom said to me. What do you say to that? What can you say to that? My instinct was to try and fill the void, the silence that descended after that question, with meaningless words, trying to say something, trying to ask questions to offer hope. My instinct was to fill it with religious stuff, because I was in seminary and I was supposed to offer pastoral care, spiritual care to these people. There must be something. They found more solace in the wonderful staff psychologist at CHOP than they found in any of my religious stuff. But I did spend hours with them, sharing meals, talking, listening, eventually realizing that there was nothing I could say to make it better. There was nothing I had to say. Nothing I could do would change baby A. And I was furious that God would not save her either. Furious. Looking back, this was a test that I had to pass to figure out how to be a minister. How to be a human being around other human beings who suffer. How to be fully human. To learn that there is nothing you can say. I looked at the story of Job, and what did his friends do? 37 chapters of what Job must have done wrong. Except, I learned in class that year that the book of Job has more than one author. That the very beginning and the very end seem to come from different places. That the middle 37 chapters of all that Hebrew poetry were probably not original. They were probably added later. And that originally, Job's friends came and heard all these troubles that had come upon him, and each of them set out from his home. They met together to go and console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust in the air upon their heads. These are grieving rituals. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. That's the original. Spiritual Care 101. When I came to this congregation, folks here talked about we need pastoral care, we need spiritual care. We haven't had a minister, and that's what we need. I said, yes, great. It's something that I'm well versed in. And so I want to offer these lessons that I've learned to all of us here, because I think that we can all practice a little bit of spiritual care for others in our lives and for ourselves, right? This story of Job and what I learned at CHOP. When bad things happen, when people get sick, when people get hurt, when bad things in the world happen, our instinct is to run and try and fill the void with stuff. If you've been at other religious houses of worship, oftentimes it's to fill it with religious stuff. Everything happens for a reason. This was all part of God's plan. I hate that. And I hate it because I've been in the position where it did not help anyone, it did not help me, it did not help baby A's parents, and it did not help baby A. And it was meaningless. But the story of Job's friends coming to sit with him for 7 days and 7 nights and not saying a word, simply being there, that was meaningful. Because I looked back on my interactions and I realized that we had spent hours together, unable for me to say anything except to be there. And for a young family away from home, going through the worst days of their lives, to simply have someone to just sit and talk with, to eat lunch with, to ask questions of who would not try and give them an answer, because no answer could make sense of it. There's an analogy about doing pastoral care, doing spiritual care, that when we come into community and someone has problems, when a friend is going through something hard, when a family member is going through something hard, rather than simply trying to pull them out of it, saying, oh, don't worry about that, don't think about that. Come over here where it's joy and light and fun and singing and dancing. The idea of pastoral care, spiritual care, is to go and sit with a person in the pain. Sometimes the analogy of the cave is used. Someone has fallen into a cave and they cannot get out. You can be the person, like Job's friends in one version of the story, who yell down into the cave, hey, what'd you do to get down there? What do you think you can do to get out? Well, what do you want? You want a rope? And there's the person who climbs down into the cave to sit with until we find our way out. If you have been the person in the cave and you have found your way out, you are qualified to give pastoral care, to give spiritual care to others, to listen, because you have been there. You know what it is. So I want to offer these just 3 very brief tips about giving pastoral care. Don't try to fill the words. Let the silence have its power. Nothing you can say will make it better. Simply being there is most important. When someone is speaking and they pause, my instinct is to rush and fill that void with words. Let the pause have its power. Being there, and if you have to say something, ask questions. And not questions like, what can I do for you? What are you thinking? If you must ask questions, ask reflective questions. Don't be like Job's friends who ask, well, what do you think you did wrong? Questions like, what are you feeling? What do you need from me? What would be helpful? Letting them come up with their own answers. That's hard to do. But I think it's most important that we practice this practice of embodiment, the idea of intention and attention that we practice with the kids, knowing what's going on with your own body, saying, wow, I'm feeling helpless. I don't know how I can help you, but I will sit here with you if that is helpful. What can I do to help you? I wonder what our church would be like if that was how we listened to one another when problems came up. I wonder what our society would be like if that was how we listened to one another when things got hard. I wonder what the political situation would be like if we listened to connect and to learn and to be present in the moment rather than try to fill the silence with our own stuff because it's uncomfortable. I wonder if we listen to listen rather than listening to respond, which is often my default. I was walking down the NICU hallway on the day that baby A was to be taken off life support. And I remember her parents walking out, and I was going somewhere else, doing something else. And they came out, and after months of me not having the right words, not knowing what to say, not knowing if I could do anything to make it better, feeling completely hopeless and helpless and like a failure as a minister, failing to provide spiritual care, pastoral care. They came out of these doors right as I came around the corner, and baby A's mom looked at me and just said, right on time. And I remember not knowing, just reacting, and getting the biggest hug and just crying together. Having the biggest hug. And I walked them out to the curb of the children's hospital, all the way to the door, because they had to go home and try and rebuild their lives. And the least I could do was accompany them that far. The end of the story of the book of Job goes through all this stuff, and eventually God answers Job. He says, what do you know, human? It's not very satisfying. Doesn't give an answer to why Job suffered. Doesn't say why any of the bad stuff happened. It gives you no answers. That's incredibly frustrating. And that is incredibly real. Sometimes there are no answers. Sometimes stuff just happens. And the reminder of the great mystery and complexity of the universe is all that we have. But if you know the story, at the very end of the book of Job, everything is returned. God gives back the sheep and the donkeys and the servants and the children. Job's wife, who's a character in this story, doesn't get mentioned as being the one who has the kids. But it is the greatest act of courage, my friends, in these scriptures, that Job's wife would bring life back into the world after having it stripped away so cruelly for no reason at all. That they would choose to have kids again. About a year after I finished at CHOP, I got a card from baby A's parents announcing the birth of baby B, her little brother, and that they were going to honor her as his big sister and thanking those who had been on their journey. What courage, what hope, what joy, even in the midst of grief and sorrow. May we, friends, put our attention onto ourselves and to those in our community. May we listen and practice spiritual care that does not seek to provide cheap answers, but courageously sits in the stuff together. May we talk, share, and be grateful for what we have. Not because we're worried about having more than others or having what those of us have lost, but because we are grateful for what we do have and we know what it would be to lose because we are present in this moment. I never had to find the right words to be changed forever. I only had to be present and listen. May it be so. Amen.